"You're not leadership material, Jacob." His words burned like acid on an open wound. I'd make him choke on them. "I'm Jacob, 30 years old. I'm a logistics supervisor, keeping the warehouse alive." Greg's betrayal gutted me, made me question my worth. I used to think loyalty meant eating the pain. Now I know it means fighting back. The fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, casting a sterile glow over the conference room. My annual review was supposed to be routine, another box to check in a life of grinding shifts. I sat across from Greg, my boss, his cheap cologne stinging my nose. His tie was crooked, his smirk worse. I'd spent 5 years at this logistics firm, fixing his screw-ups, training new hires, and staying late to balance the books he ignored. My hands rested on the table, steady, but my pulse hammered. "Jacob," he started, leaning back like he owned the world. "You're reliable. Always have been. But leadership? That's not you." His words landed like a sledgehammer. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face blank. "You're a worker bee, not a queen. Stick to what you're good at." He chuckled, flipping through my review like it was a comic book. My ears burned. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, and this was my reward. A smug dismissal in a room that smelled like stale coffee. I wanted to slam my fist on the table, to tell him how I'd save his ass when he botched the Peterson account, how I trained half the staff while he golfed with clients. But I didn't. My throat felt like it was closing, and my hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. "Anything to add?" he asked, not even looking up. I forced a nod, my voice locked somewhere deep. "Good," he said, sliding the review across the table. "Needs improvement. Leadership potential." The words mocked me in bold print. As I left the room, my boots echoed on the linoleum. 2 co-workers, Sarah and Mike, stood by the coffee machine, their whispers cutting through the air. "Not leadership material," Sarah muttered, her eyes flicking to me. Mike snorted, turning away. My face burned, but I kept walking, my heart pounding like a war drum. The humiliation wasn't just Greg's words. It was the way they spread, like wildfire through dry grass. By lunch, half the office knew. I felt their stares, heard their hushed laughs. My cubicle felt smaller, the walls closing in. That night, I sat in my truck outside the warehouse, engine off, the silence heavy. My review sat crumpled on the passenger seat, Greg's handwriting a jagged scar. I'd given everything to this place, sweat, sleepless nights, my pride. And for what? To be told I was nothing but a cog in his machine? My fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. I wasn't a kid anymore, dreaming of promotions. I was 30, and this was my life, chained to a desk, under a man who didn't deserve his chair. But something shifted in that moment. My chest ached, not just from anger but from clarity. Greg thought he could bury me with a few words, thought I'd just take it. He didn't know me. Not really. I started the truck, the engine's roar matching the fire in my gut. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. But what could I do against a man who held all the cards? The warehouse air was thick with the smell of cardboard and diesel, a familiar weight that clung to my skin. It was a week after Greg's verdict, and his words still echoed in my head, sharp as a blade. I'd spent years here, my boots grinding into the concrete, my hands sorting shipments while Greg took credit for every smooth delivery. My jaw clenched as I stacked crates, the rhythm of the work doing little to dull the ache in my chest. Loyalty had been my currency, quiet, steady, unquestioning. But now it felt like a chain. I remembered the first time I covered for Greg. A botched order, a client screaming over the phone. I stayed until 2 a.m., reworking the schedule, calling drivers, fixing his mess. He clapped me on the back the next day, called me dependable, and took the client to lunch. My name never came up. I'd shrug it off then, told myself that's what a team player does. But now, stacking boxes under flickering lights, I saw it clearly. Every late night, every fixed mistake, every nod I gave when he claimed my work, it was all fuel for his ego. My stomach churned, a mix of regret and rage. At break, I sat alone in the lunchroom, my sandwich untouched. Across the room, Greg laughed with the new hires, his voice booming like he owned their souls. I trained those guys, showed them how to read the manifests, how to spot a bad palate. Greg never mentioned it. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug, the ceramic hot against my palm. One of the new guys, Tom, glanced my way, then quickly looked down. Word of my review had spread like oil on water. I was the guy who wasn't leadership material. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. That night, I walked to my truck, my breath visible in the cold. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, one of the few coworkers I trusted. "Greg's telling everyone you froze during your review." Said he didn't fight back. My chest tightened, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to text back, to tell her I was biding my time, but my fingers hovered over the screen, frozen. What could I say? That I was still processing the betrayal? That every laugh, every whisper, felt like a fresh cut? I shoved the phone in my pocket and slammed the truck door. Sitting there, engine off, I stared at the warehouse, its lights glaring like accusing eyes. I'd given this place everything. My energy, my pride, my silence. And for what? To be humiliated, to be invisible? My hand shook, not just from the cold, but from a spark I hadn't felt before. Greg thought he could keep me down, thought I'd stay loyal, stay quiet. But loyalty wasn't a leash anymore. It was a weapon. I just didn't know how to wield it yet. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and grease, a familiar haunt from my early days in logistics. I sat in a cracked vinyl booth, nursing a lukewarm mug, when Frank walked in, my old mentor from my first warehouse job. His weathered face broke into a grin, but his eyes narrowed when he saw my slumped shoulders. "You look like hell, kid," he said, sliding in across from me. My laugh was hollow, Greg's words still clawing at my mind. I spilled all, Greg's review, the not leadership material jab, the whispers that followed me like shadows. Frank leaned back, his calloused hands folded, listening without interrupting. My voice cracked as I admitted how small it made me feel, how 5 years of grinding meant nothing to a guy like Greg. Frank's silence was heavy, but his nod felt like permission to keep going. "He's a leech, Jacob," he finally said, his voice low. "But you're better than him. Always were." My chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and doubt. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't shake Frank's words. My laptop glowed on the kitchen table, the company's public financials open on the screen. I'd started digging out of curiosity, but what I found made my pulse race. The firm was bleeding. Missed contracts, late deliveries, clients jumping ship. Greg's name was on every failure, but he'd pinned them on team errors. My errors. My hands clenched, nails biting into my palms. He'd built his throne on my back, and the company was crumbling under him. I paced the room, my boots thudding on the worn floorboards. The numbers didn't lie. Greg was careless, coasting on charm while the business tanked. My breath quickened as an idea took root, wild but clear. What if I could use his failures against him? What if I could take control? My heart pounded like it was trying to break free. I wasn't just a worker bee. I knew this company better than Greg ever would. Every route, every client, every shortcut. By 3 a.m., I was scribbling notes, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and fire. I need money, connections, a plan. It felt impossible, like staring up a mountain with no gear. But Frank's voice echoed in my head. "You're better than him." I pulled up my bank account, $4,327. Not enough, but a start. I'd save every dime, work side gigs, anything to build a war chest. Greg thought he'd buried me, but he'd just lit a fuse. How far was I willing to go to prove him wrong? My eyes burned from staring at my laptop screen, the glow casting shadows across my cramped apartment. It was 2 a.m., and I was on my third coffee, poring over business acquisition articles. Greg's smug face haunted me, his voice calling me a worker bee, not a leader. My hands trembled as I typed, not from fear anymore, but from purpose. Every late night, every side gig, every dollar saved was a brick in the wall I was building to bury him. I'd taken on extra work, delivering packages on weekends, consulting for a small freight company after hours. My body ached, my back stiff from hauling crates, but the extra cash flowed into a separate account. By month's end, I had $8,000 saved. Not enough to buy a company, but enough to feel the weight of possibility. My breath caught as I checked the balance, my heart pounding like a drum. I was doing this, really doing it. At the warehouse, Greg's arrogance grew sloppier. He'd lost another client, a big one, after missing a delivery deadline. I overheard him in his office, laughing it off, blaming logistics issues. My issues. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms as I stacked pallets nearby. But I kept my head down, my face blank. He didn't notice me listening, didn't see me noting every mistake. I started emailing old contacts, drivers, suppliers, even a retired exec I'd met years ago. Just catching up, I'd say, but I was planting seeds, building a network. One night, I met a guy named Victor at a bar, a friend of Frank's who'd invested in logistics before. My hands sweated as I pitched my idea over cheap beers, my voice steady despite the knot in my gut. The company's weak, I said, sliding him a napkin with numbers I'd scribbled, debt ratios, missed contracts. Victor's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. Risky, he said, but possible. My pulse raced. He wasn't saying no. Back home, I barely slept. My bed felt like a prison, my mind racing with plans. Greg's failures were my leverage, his lost clients, his ignored reports, his lazy oversight. But the stakes were high. If I failed, I'd lose everything. My savings, my job, my shot. My stomach twisted at the thought, but Greg's voice in my head pushed me forward. Not leadership material. I'd show him what I was made of. But could I pull this off without him catching on? The conference room smelled of stale air and desperation, a fitting stage for the final act. My palms were slick with sweat as I sat across from two investors, Victor and his partner, Lena, their eyes scanning the proposal I'd spent months crafting. My tie felt like a noose, but I kept my voice steady, laying out the numbers. Our company's debts, missed contracts, and Greg's string of failures. My heart pounded, each beat a reminder of a risk. I was betting everything, $12,000 in savings, side gig earnings, and a loan that could crush me, to buy the parent corporation sinking under Greg's weight. Victor leaned forward, his pen tapping the table. You're sure you can turn this around? He asked, his voice sharp. I nodded, my throat dry. I know every inch of this business. Greg doesn't. Lena's gaze softened, but her question cut deep. What's your endgame, Jacob? I hesitated, my fingers twitching under the table. Revenge wasn't the word I used. Control, I said. Fix what's broken. They exchanged a look, then nodded. The deal was on. Back at the warehouse, I played my part. Head down, stacking crates, dodging Greg's smirks. He called me into his office that morning, tossing a new project on my desk with a grin. Don't mess this up, worker bee, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. My jaw clenched, but I nodded, my eyes on the floor. He didn't know I just signed papers to buy the company out from under him. My chest tightened with the secret, a mix of fear and thrill. Every nod, every yes sir, was a mask hiding the storm inside. The next week was a blur of late-night calls and lawyer meetings. My hands shook as I signed the final documents, the ink sealing Greg's fate. The parent company was mine, quietly, through a shell corporation Victor helped set up. Greg's mistakes had made it cheap. His arrogance made it possible. I barely slept, my body wired on adrenaline and coffee. At work, he kept barking orders, oblivious, while I memorized the weight of the termination letter in my desk drawer. The day the deal closed, I stood outside the warehouse, my breath fogging in the cold dawn. My phone buzzed, Victor confirming the transfer. My fingers trembled as I gripped it, the reality sinking in. I own the place now. Greg was done. But as I walked back inside, his voice echoing from the break room, my stomach twisted. Would he see it coming? Could I face him when the moment arrived? The boardroom felt colder than usual, the air heavy with the hum of fluorescent lights. I stood at the head of the table, my hand steady despite the pulse hammering in my throat. Greg sat across from me, slouched, his tie loose, smirking like he still owned the place. My termination letter for him sat in a manila envelope, its weight like a loaded gun in my hand. I'd waited for this moment. Months of planning, saving, and hiding my moves. Now it was time. Jacob, what's this about? Greg asked, his voice laced with that familiar condescension. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face blank, years of swallowing his insults giving me practice. Business, I said, sliding the envelope across the table. My voice was calm, but inside, my heart roared like an engine. He raised an eyebrow, opening it with a lazy chuckle. His eyes scanned the page, and the smirk vanished. His face paled, his fingers freezing on the paper. What the hell is this? He stammered, his voice cracking. "You're fired, Greg," I said, each word sharp, deliberate. My hands gripped the table's edge, knuckles white, as I leaned forward. "I own the company now. You're done." His mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping for air. My chest burned with the fire of every late night, every stolen credit, every time he called me worker bee. His eyes darted, searching for an out. "You can't do this," he spat, his voice rising. "You're nothing without me." I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him. 5 years, Greg. I fixed your messes, saved your clients, ran this place while you played golf. You thought I wasn't leadership material. My voice stayed low, but it trembled with the weight of suppressed rage. His hands shook, the letter crumpling in his fist. "This is a mistake," he said, but his bravado was gone, replaced by a flicker of fear. My pulse pounded, a mix of triumph and something heavier, years of silence finally breaking. He stood, chair scraping the floor, his face red now. "You'll regret this, Jacob. You don't have what it takes." I didn't flinch, my eyes locked on his. "Pack your things," I said. "You're out by noon." The room felt smaller, the air thick with the wreckage of his ego. He stormed out, slamming the door, but I caught the tremble in his shoulders. I exhaled, my breath shaky, the weight of the moment settling in. I'd done it. But as the door's echo faded, a question gnawed at me. Would his downfall be enough to heal the scars he'd left? The warehouse hummed with a new rhythm, but the air felt heavier than before. Greg was gone, his office empty, his nameplate tossed in a drawer. I stood in the doorway, my hands still, but my chest tight with a strange mix of relief and unease. Firing him had felt like a blade cutting clean through years of resentment. But now, standing in his place, the weight of what I'd done pressed down. My boots scuffed the floor, each step echoing the question I couldn't shake. Had I gone too far? Word spread fast. By noon, the office buzzed with whispers. Greg's firing was the talk of every break room. Sarah, one of the few I trusted, caught my eye across the floor, her nod quiet but heavy with respect. Others, like Mike, avoided my gaze, their laughter gone silent. I'd promoted 2 workers Greg had overlooked, giving them roles I knew they'd earned. Their gratitude was real, but it didn't fill the hollow spot inside me. My hands trembled slightly as I signed off on a new schedule, Greg's smug voice still lingering in my head. "You don't have what it takes." Outside work, Greg's world was unraveling. I heard through a supplier that he'd been blackballed from a major client meeting. His reputation as a careless manager had caught up. A friend texted me a screenshot of his LinkedIn, untouched for weeks, no new job listed. His downfall was public, brutal, and final. My jaw clenched at the thought, a flicker of satisfaction warring with guilt. I'd wanted him to feel what I felt, humiliated, powerless, but seeing it happen left a bitter taste. My coffee went cold on the desk, untouched. That night, I sat in my truck, the engine off, staring at the warehouse's dark silhouette. My fingers traced the steering wheel, worn smooth from years of gripping it through anger and exhaustion. I'd won, taken the company, turned the tables, but victory felt heavier than I'd expected. Every choice I'd made, every risk had led to this. I was the leader now, but the scars Greg left weren't gone. My breath fogged the windshield, each exhale a reminder of the cost. Had I fought for justice, or just for revenge? The next morning, I'd face the team as their boss, no longer the worker bee. My stomach twisted at the thought, could I carry this weight without becoming like Greg? The answer wasn't clear, but the challenge was mine now. The warehouse felt different now, its pulse steady under my watch. 6 months had passed since I fired Greg, and the numbers told a story he'd never understand. Contracts renewed, clients returning, morale climbing. I stood at the loading dock, my boots firm on the concrete, watching pallets move like clockwork. My chest swelled with pride, but the scars of Greg's words, not leadership material, still ached, faint but there, like a bruise under the skin. I'd rebuilt the team, promoting people like Sarah, who'd earned it through grit, not charm. The break room was louder now, filled with laughter instead of whispers. My hands no longer shook when I signed off on reports, but the weight of leadership pressed heavy. Every decision, every late night, reminded me of the line I'd crossed. My coffee mug sat on my desk, chipped but familiar, a quiet symbol of the grind that got me here. I wasn't Greg. I listened, I fixed, I led, but doubt lingered. Could I keep this up? Greg's downfall was complete. A contact told me he'd taken a low-level job at a rival firm. His name a punchline in the industry. No more golf trips, no more smug grins. His LinkedIn was a ghost town, his reputation buried under the mistakes I'd once covered. My jaw tightened, a flicker of satisfaction mixing with something colder. I'd wanted him to feel the sting of being nothing, but seeing it didn't erase the years I'd spent feeling small. My fingers traced the edge of my desk, the wood worn from my grip. That night, I stood outside under the warehouse lights, the air cool against my face. My breath was steady, but my heart carried the weight of every step, every side gig, every risk, every sleepless night. I transformed from the guy who took orders to the one giving them, but the cost was etched in me. Betrayal had forged me, but leading was my choice. I wasn't just avenging a wound. I was building something better. As I locked the gate, my phone buzzed. A message from Frank, my old mentor. Proud of you, kid. You did what most can't. I exhaled, a faint smile breaking through. The road ahead was mine, but one question lingered, sharp and unresolved. Would I ever outrun the shadow of what I'd done?